Hey, bro, I'm probably gonna turn on a podcast real quick if you're cool with that.
Yo, what's the podcast? Which one you
Oh,
watching?
it's a dude with allegations who has a bunch of political opinions that he don't bother to look up to see if he know what he talking about.
Why the
I,
fuck
I
would you watch
resonate
that?
with that as a man, so I want to watch. I want to watch what he has.
You resonate with a man that don't Google nothing before he talk, who has a
Wait,
platform?
no,
That's
no, no,
dangerous.
bro. It ain't even that deep. He's sharing his opinion. He's sharing his completely uninformed opinion that he did not bother to weigh against evidence or peer review study. And I think it's good that I get my opinions from a guy like that who just don't have the wherewithal to look stuff up. I think that's good.
No, wait, why do you resonate with the allegations? Hold on,
Here you go
there's a
with the
lot.
woke mind virus stuff, bro. Come on.
It is not woke mind virus to want a
Whatever,
pervert
whatever,
to not
whatever,
have a
whatever. I'm turning
platform
it
and
on.
look
I'm
stuff
turning it
up.
on. Hey, real quick before we get into the video, and it's gonna take 3, maybe 4 minutes to talk about this, but it is necessary. And this video is going to be around an hour long, so you have plenty of video to watch. I just need you for the time it makes to make 2 or 3 hot pockets. Also, please understand that the reason I'm putting this at the beginning of the video and not the end of the video is because most videos have a really low retention rate. People jump off of the video around 40 to 50% in. So only half of the people who watch this video are going to see any of this if I were to put it in the middle or at the end. So I have to do it now. I would love to put it in later, but people would have to behave differently, and I can't control other people's behavior. I just have to accommodate or move around it in order to have a career.
YouTube is demonetizing a lot of videos right now. Like a lot.
This is something that a lot of content creators are going through. FD Signifier has had to deal with YouTube copyright striking everything and shutting parts of his videos down. Corey Kenshin has talked about not getting paid frequently. Lots of black creators with way larger platforms are dealing with what I'm dealing with. And oftentimes when I talk about this, the comment section thinks that I'm making it up, even though this has been a decades long conversation. This has been happening since the adpocalypse. So what I need you all to do, if you can afford it, is to go to my Patreon if you enjoy my content and if you want to support me. Some of you are going to tell me go to Nebula. That would take months, and apparently Nebula is a Zionist platform, and YouTube's already a Zionist platform in and of itself. I'm already on a couple of Zionist platforms because I don't have a choice. If I can choose to not get on another one, I would prefer to. Also, Nebula would take months. I would have to build a brand new audience on Nebula on top of hoping that people from my current audience go over there. And audiences take a really long time to transfer over. I have 500,000 followers between TikTok and Instagram, and I have 30,000 here on YouTube. I can't even get 1% of the people following me everywhere else to just show up here. So getting people on a Nebula when a lot of people don't know what it is isn't going to work, at least not short term. I get that it could make me money later and that a lot of people want that, but my rent is due on the first of the month every month like everybody else. So I need something a bit more immediate. If any of you have dealt with extreme poverty, then you understand what it feels like to have your lights turned off for you to get a job and then to have to wait to turn your lights back on because it will take around a month and a half for you to be able to get the checks so that you can pay your light bill. Being told to get a job might help you in the long term, but it doesn't change the immediate need. I have to eat every single day. I have to have electricity and shelter and water every single day. A 6-month plan just isn't going to feed me today. So please, like, share, and subscribe if you enjoy my work. And if you have the means to do so, my Patreon is $2, and I would greatly appreciate you. Thank you all so much for your time. Now to the video.
What do Joey the Anime Man, Joe Rogan, and Theo all have in common? They are all people who say ridiculous things and get away with it because we treat them like they're stupid. And to be frank, they are. These are not particularly smart men, but it's a bit more insidious than that, isn't it? Hi, I'm Mo from Mo Hates Media, and I'm here to help you explore why you need to hate media or like it or be a bit more complicated about the things you enjoy. And I would love to invite you for a moment, if you'll join me, into the space that I occupy when I see men like this and am forced to engage with their work in any meaningful way, which I utterly despise. Now, this all started because I made a video talking about how Joey the Anime Man is kind of a garbage human being. And when talking about things that he had done, a bunch of people hit my comments saying that it wasn't that bad, that he wasn't particularly evil. He was just a guy who was, what's a good word for it? Overconfident, condescending, and the like, and that he didn't realize how he came off. This was around the time he made that video where he attacked that woman for saying that she needed more anime protagonists, specifically female anime protagonists, and Joey cut her video in half in order to make whatever this is.
My hot take is that we need more female protagonists.
Enough said.
Sailor Moon, Madoka Magica, those are the obvious ones. Serial Experiments Lane, Girl Who Leapt Through Time, Kill la Kill, Kanan, Ogo Proxy, Claymore, Yojo Senki, Ghost in the Shell, Violet Evergarden, Azumanga Daioh, Maiden Abyss, Nana, Shoujo Kakume Utena, Yona of the Dawn, Ascendance of a Bookworm, Psycho Pass, Black Lagoon, Certain Scientific Railgun, Haibana Denmechi, Hayafuru, My Neighbor Totoro, Little Witch Academia, Hibiki Euphonium, Ancient Magus Bride, Nichijou, Blood Plus, Blood Sea, Kana no Kyokai, Kiki's Delivery Service, House Moving Castle, Nausicaa, Spirited Away, Suzumiya Haruhi no Yutsu, Soul Song of Freeran, Lovely Complex, Fruits Basket, Princess Tutu, Perfect Blue, Oran High School Host Club, Carol and Tuesday, Apothecary Diaries, Bocchi the Rock, Keep Your Hands Off Ezoken, Dead Demons, Destruction, Ghost Sick, Wolf Children, Georgia Part 6, Moribito, Shirobako, Bloom Into You, Kino no Tabi, Humanity Has Declined, Slayers, Uma Musume. Damn. I guess we do need more female anime protagonists, huh?
Now, a bunch of people were giving Joey the benefit of the doubt, and they said that he was just misinterpreting her message, or that she herself misspoke, because there are plenty of anime protagonists that are female. What everybody failed to notice is that Joey cut her video in half. The full video had this woman speaking for a minute where she openly admitted that there are lots of female protagonists in anime and that we are in a better place now than we were in the past, but that she wanted more. So Joey couldn't be bothered to listen to a woman talk for longer than a minute before making a mean video about her that completely misrepresented her point, while he made a horrible point in and of itself.
Anime hot take is that we need more female protagonists.
Enough said. Now, granted, we do have some. We could always use more.
We need more.
But if you had to pick, who would you say are some of your top tier anime female protagonists out there right now?
The entire cast of Madoka Magica.
Well said. Oh, of course, even a classic Sailor Moon.
Yes, of course.
Can't go wrong with that.
Most powerful in the anime universe.
I want to go back and correct something real quick, so pardon me. It's not that Joey didn't listen to this woman for a minute, or that none of the men having this response, a similar response that Joey had, couldn't listen to this woman for a minute. They couldn't listen to her for 21 seconds. That video was 21 seconds. They could not give that woman 21 seconds, and in that video, she named an entire cast of women. An entire cast of women. Meaning she knows that they are female protagonists in anime. She just wants more. Again, she acknowledged it. Everybody freaked out on her for no reason. And Joey led the charge on this because he couldn't listen to a woman talk for 21 seconds. I also want to point out here that the two anime that Joey mentioned first, Sailor Moon and Madoka Magica, were covered in the video that he is making fun of by the woman that he's attacking. She said Madoka Magica. Sailor Moon got mentioned. It happened immediately. He couldn't shut up for 21 seconds to listen to this woman talk before he went off. And he galvanized a bunch of other weirdos on the internet to start going off on her too. Why would you name a bunch of women characters as a gotcha to a woman that wants to see more women characters, as if to imply that there is enough, that we've met some sort of quota? Well, to be frank, it's because Joey's a bigot. His bigotry and problematicism is well documented, and even some of it is on his own social media. And yet, time and time again, people keep giving him the benefit of the doubt, even other content creators, like this one.
Okay, I don't think he's being malicious making this video. I think he's just like any other commenter, maybe any other Redditor. I'm sorry, Joey, but...
Inakiu has just said that Joey wasn't being malicious when making a video. The video in question was his response video to all the criticism that he had gotten when going off on that one woman who said that she wanted more female protagonists in anime. Joey went on for more than 15 minutes about how everybody misunderstood him, how his take was being taken out of context, how nobody understood what he was doing. And I think the response that she offered him was measured, nuanced, and well put. The only thing that I disagree with was the take that he wasn't being malicious in his response. What Joey did was bigoted. He heard a woman say, I would like more representation. I want to feel more included in a space I participated in. And Joey's response was to go, shut up, we have enough. This is how many of you we have. Which is an evil thing to do. And then when getting criticized, he made a video about how the criticism he got was unfair. That is malicious. He did that on purpose because he is a bigot. And to compare him to any other Redditor commenter as if that lessens what he's doing is to deny the reality that a lot of Redditors and commenters are also just bigots. Reddit is rife with people who hate other people because they exist. If he is just another Redditor or just another commenter, that doesn't make him less racist, sexist, or anything else. Now, I've talked about Joey the Anime Man a lot, and honestly, I'm not a big fan of his. I've made multiple videos about how I can't stand him, as I've mentioned earlier, but I want to pull this back because there is a grander point being illustrated here, not only because of his own behavior, but how other people in my comments and even, again, other content creators have reacted to him. And that is the knee-jerk reaction to give him, or rather men like that, the benefit of the doubt. I brought up Theo Von, Joe Rogan, and Joey all at the same time because I feel as though I'm watching the same thing happen, and I have had personal experiences with all three of their fan bases. An example of this is when I criticized Theo Von for making this joke.
I grew up in my neighborhood. We didn't have a lot of diversity in my neighborhood. Diversity is always people's talking about it. And we didn't have it. You know, my neighborhood was poor black, poor white. That was our neighborhood, you know. So I didn't feel any white privilege. I know some people had it, man, you know. I knew some motherfuckers with sweaters. But I was 2 tank tops in the winter, okay? And I just didn't feel it, you know. I wish I'd have had some white privilege, dude. Sign me up. But I didn't have it, man. It was just poor black kids, poor white kids, man. And my poor black friends would always be like, man, look what you did to us. And I'm like, dude, do you think I would do all that shit to y'all and then move right next door, bro? Now, we gonna split this plum or not, dog? We're in this together, man.
Now, the reason I took issue with this joke is because its core premise is flat out false. Of course, poor white people still benefit from white privilege. Privilege does not mean money. Financial privilege is a type of privilege, but just because the privilege isn't financial doesn't mean that other types of privileges don't exist and that they aren't considered white ones. It's like saying that other dogs don't exist if it's not a husky, as if there aren't other species of dog. It's just a strange hill to die on when we have so many well-recorded documents of people having different types of privilege regardless of their financial standing. If I were to get arrested with a white person for committing the same crime, it is not unlikely that I would be given double the time, or it would be assumed that I was the one solely responsible for the crime that had happened, be it a robbery, a fire, or something else. That happens to people. That has happened to people on multiple occasions. If Theo were to speed in certain cities, they would probably let him off with a warning. But if I were to do so, a routine traffic stop could be deadly for me. I could get really hurt. I live in the city of Chicago. I lived next to a sundown neighborhood. If anybody knows the city of Chicago and they know Bridgeport, I lived in Bronzeville. Bridgeport and Bronzeville share a border, which is Wabash around 35th. And if you go east of Wabash, you're in Bronzeville. That's the predominantly black area. But if you go west of Wabash, you end up in Bridgeport, which is a mixed Latino, white, and Asian neighborhood directly next to Chinatown, a little bit south of Chinatown. And Wabash is also where the Chicago Police Department headquarters is. And if you know anything about the Chicago Police Department, you could imagine that that border is pretty precarious for people who look like me. There were times in Chicago's history where it was not safe for me to walk around at Bridgeport at night, even if I was just coming home from work and getting off of the train, because something horrible could happen to me, and the people involved would simply get away with it because of the color of my skin. It has been made abundantly clear that black people aren't always welcome in that neighborhood. And there are other neighborhoods in the city of Chicago and adjacent to the city of Chicago that are like that. Take Mount Greenwood, which borders Beverly, Evergreen Park, suburbs that are kind of in the city, but kind of not, because the CTA, the Chicago Transit Authority, our bus and train system, touches those areas, but you're very much on the outskirts of town. Those things are west. They started western, and as you go further west, you get out of Evergreen Park and you get into Mount Greenwood. Now, Mount Greenwood and Evergreen Park can be precarious neighborhoods if you're black. Mount Greenwood especially so, because at a certain time in the 50s and 60s, black people simply weren't welcome there. Evergreen Park also has a spotty history. My mom went to high school down the street from the house that my grandparents lived in up until they passed away in the late 2010s, right when I was getting out of college. A mile away from where my mom went to school and a mile away from the house she grew up in and the house that my grandparents lived in for the remainder of their lives was a sundown town where, when my mom was in high school in the 70s, kids would leave their predominantly white high school, Evergreen Park High School, and they would walk down Kedzie and they would beat up the black kids at my mom's very recently integrated school, because integrating schools took a lot longer than the couple of years that we talked about Ruby Bridges. Even though it started in the 50s, it took a while for people to adjust, and a lot of those people's children simply did not take it well. So I grew up a mile away from where my mom got bricks thrown at her for going to school because she was next to a neighborhood where white people lived, and they did not want black people in the general vicinity, even if they were technically in the black part of the neighborhood. The Chicago Cicero riot started because black people moved into a building. So yes, white people have done horrible things to black people while living next door. They were doing horrible things to my mom, and they were about a 5-minute drive away from her. Same with my grandparents. They were harming people who lived in the same apartment complexes as them. So Theo Von's premise is a flat out lie. So historically, it's not there. He denies the existence of white privilege, and then he says that horrible things don't happen to people who are in proximity to white people, and that white people would not harm people and then live next door to them, when that is almost exclusively what white people have done throughout the history of the United States. If you were brown and you lived next to them, they would hurt you. They would move next to you and they would hurt you. That's how neighborhoods got gentrified, redlined, and how entire neighborhoods got burned down. Neighborhoods with black people in them. Take a look at Tulsa, Oklahoma. We lost a city for a little bit. We lost the black Mecca. But none of that really matters to Theo Von's fans. It doesn't even matter that he says that we're in this together because he's poor, because Theo Von isn't poor and openly endorsed Donald Trump, the president that cut everybody's welfare benefits. The very welfare that people in his very neighborhood, both black and white, probably depended on.
Well, I did it. We had the best border.
Oh, the wall, they should have kept it. I agree.
Theo Von very much is not in this with us, and he never was. But again, Theo Von's fans don't care about that. They don't know, and they don't expect him to be honest. As long as he performs the way in which his home feels to his target demographic, as long as he feels familiar, he is under no obligation to be honest or be correct. He doesn't have to know stuff. Theo Von does not need to know what he's talking about. He just needs to feel like your uncle, feel like your friend. And as a professional comedian and podcaster, I personally believe that as a man with a platform, it is his responsibility to at least Google the things he's talking about before he talks about them. But again, he's under no obligation to do so. And his fans are not going to hold him to any account because it feels
Right. And the same could be said of Joe Rogan. I distinctly remember a moment in 2021 when Illinois passed the Pretrial Fairness Act, and everybody jumped into a tizzy because, as you know, Chicago is in Illinois. Chicago is my hometown, and Chicago is often the subject of conversation in regards to high crime rates, despite the fact that our crime rate has been the lowest that it has been in the 1960s and that we have not been in the top 10 most violent cities in the country for literal decades now. But I digress. The Pretrial Fairness Act effectively completely undid cash bond in a lot of ways because it eliminated the ability for judges in courtrooms to hold people in jail for inordinate amounts of time for no real reason, without any due cause, and just because they didn't have enough money, especially for nonviolent offenses. That means if you got caught jaywalking and you were taken into custody, which is a thing that the Chicago Police Department would and has absolutely done, instead of you sitting in a jail cell for literal years because you couldn't pay an exorbitant amount of bail, the judge would have to make a decision on whether or not you were safe to be in the community or not because you jaywalked. Same for littering or having just a little bit too much weed. If you weren't a danger to the community, if you had somewhere to go, if you had a job, if you had ample housing, if you were just out and drunk one night and being a little bit belligerent, you wouldn't spend years in Cook County Jail because Cook County Jail had a bad habit of holding people for years. And Cook County has a bad habit of holding people for years before trial on little to nothing. When I was arrested, I was held for literal years before I even got to see my day in court. 4 years, to be exact. House arrest, jail, the whole nine. 4 years just for me to get put on probation because I didn't have priors, which was a thing that we had figured out long before we had even gotten to the conclusion of my case. But I use me to serve as an example of how the Cook County Courthouse will hold people for a long chunk of their life without proper due process, which is unconstitutional. In order to end this unconstitutional practice, cash bail was considered obsolete and the Pretrial Fairness Act was proposed and then passed. Now, again, judges had to make decisions. If you had gone down for a shooting, a robbery, some arson, a judge can still decide to keep you in jail. People weren't just getting out automatically and running amok in the city if they were considered genuinely dangerous. It just meant that a guy that had some weed on him who was going to go smoke it later at a party wouldn't be held in the same jail cell or subject to the same system that somebody who had just shot 4 people might be held in, because that doesn't really make any sense. Stealing a loaf of bread is not kidnapping a woman, and those people shouldn't be in the same room, let alone for the same amount of time. It's just nonsensical. But Joe Rogan had a very different take on what was going on. Here, Rogan states that they're essentially almost eliminating cash bail for almost everything dangerous: aggravated battery, burglary, intimidation, aggravated DUI, fleeing and eluding drug offenses, and threatening a public official. No bail. Now, the core issue with this take is that what Joe Rogan said about it is fundamentally false. Yet again, here is another instance of a man with a platform who just doesn't know what the heck he's talking about. He didn't look up the Pretrial Fairness Act, and a lot of his reaction to what the Pretrial Fairness Act was about was a meme that was made and circulated on Facebook with little to no research. Joe Rogan is pulling info from Facebook and then giving it to his fans, his millions of fans, for millions of dollars at a time. And again, if someone is going to be made a millionaire for having opinions specifically on politics, they should maybe know politics. But again, Joe Rogan is held to no account because his fan base doesn't expect him to know anything. They treat him as if he does, just like Theo fans treat him as if he does. But they don't. They'll vote the way these people tell them to, but they don't actually demand that they have their information correct, which is this very interesting double consciousness where people have the authority to shift how you even participate in politics. But when they get questioned on how they're participating in the world based on the influence of these people, it's passed over, swept under the rug. It's almost treated as if it's a joke. This person's a comedian. They don't mean it. He's not supposed to know stuff. He's just a funny guy. Joe is just an internet funny guy. The stuff he says doesn't matter. And Joey does not have extreme political showings like this because he's not moving people to support certain policies, even though I feel ideologically he's not that distinct from the people that I brought up in this. And Joey did get on his podcast to talk about the ending of Attack on Titan, a show / manga that he never finished, and openly admitted that he never finished because he needed to share his opinion, and people defended his right to share his opinion on media that he did not consume. So in the small and grand sense, there are just people in the world who are allowed to share and spout off nonsense with no expectation from their fan base for them to actually do any research or have any sort of competency in what they're talking about. Joe Rogan is seen as a very important figure in UFC, despite the fact that he's not that good of a fighter and has kind of a garbage record. He's seen as a connoisseur of stand-up comedy, even though he's not a good stand-up comedian, and a lot of his stand-up comedy has been critically panned, and the audiences don't seem to love it much either. Theo Von is taken extremely seriously as a political commentator, as is Joe Rogan, but neither one of them particularly know politics, nor are they particularly politically or policy literate. They can't tell you what policies are. And like the example that I just gave earlier, Joe doesn't even look the stuff up. But again, why would he? No one expects him to, so why would he hold himself to any sort of standard? We have been giving people careers and millions of dollars for sharing their unfiltered, unedited, and uninformed opinion. And yeah, people get to have opinions, but when you have a platform, you should at least attempt to inform your opinions with genuine information, peer-reviewed study. There should be Googling, reading, documentaries, frequent trips to the libraries, and conversations with experts. But these men don't have to do that. They can consume and regurgitate whatever they think under the guise of opinion, even if that opinion can shift millions of people into participating in things that are fundamentally self-destructive. And I find that to be extremely dangerous, not only on the part of the people who have the platforms, but also on the people who consume this stuff. Why would you as an audience member not want the person who you're giving your money to, spending your time with, and potentially voting by or voting alongside to not know anything? Why would you listen to a person who simply doesn't know stuff? And why would you not expect them to? I don't listen to people who make things up and talk. I just don't. And I don't understand that as a consumer. As a consumer, if I'm coming to you for politics, you need to know politics. If I'm coming to you for fight stuff, you need to know fighting. If I'm coming to you for music, you need to be good at it, and you need to be able to articulate your opinions on it and then back it up with some sort of skill. I just don't listen to random strangers who regurgitate things that I vaguely agree with. I want my ideas to be challenged. And when I am affirmed, because I do want to be affirmed in my ideals, I want it to be affirmed by people who have done the work to be able to affirm their own ideals. And then my hope is that I end up agreeing with them because of evidence, because they were able to prove a point to me. But people do not engage with things in that manner. And honestly, as I've said before, everything's treated as sort of a joke, and that is also worth unpacking. So maybe some of you don't know this about me, but I am a professional stand-up comedian, or at least I was until I retired about a month ago. The reasons I retired I'm going to keep to myself for now, and I might talk about later, but I have direct experience in the field of comedy. So I'm going to speak about my own perspective, but do understand that my perspective is informed by a decade of participating in the field professionally and being relatively popular. Chicago was not an easy city to make it in, and I did comedy exclusively while making content for the past year. And that is the only way I've paid my bills since last August. Now, it's been a year since breaking out. And before that, I was making most of my side money in comedy. I'm not the strongest or most accredited comic, but I do have some degree of knowledge in what I'm going to talk about. So understand that there is anecdote here, but there is also anecdote backed up by professional experience. And I will also be leaning on the ideas of other comics in my field who have way more experience than me. I want to take a moment to talk about jester's privilege. For those of you who don't know what jester's privilege is defined by the historical and social right that allowed court jesters to freely mock, criticize, and speak truths to powerful figures like kings or queens without facing punishment as long as it was framed as a joke. That meant a jester could make fun of a king, a queen, members of the court, etc., and not face any sort of punishment or criticism as long as they were joking. They got to make fun of people in power as long as they go, well, I'm joking. It's, I'm making a funny. It allowed the jesters to do their jobs. Unfortunately, that definition doesn't seem to be used when people use jester's privilege in modern day, especially when applying it to their favorite podcasters, comedians, or problematic figures, i.e. the people that I mentioned earlier in this video. But it's also applicable to many other people, including other comedians. Yeah, technically comedian and jester are different jobs that have a lot of relation. Thus, jester's privilege is directly applicable, but it's been used improperly. A lot of people give jester's privilege to people in moments where they aren't really being a jester, when they're not making fun of people in power. They're just being bigoted, and being bigoted, especially towards people who are downtrodden and less fortunate than you, is literally not what a jester is supposed to do. So when someone says something horrible and people go, well, they're joking, or they're a comedian, they don't need to know what they're talking about, they don't need to know anything, they're just having fun, it's just a joke, you're not supposed to take it seriously, they are ruining what is otherwise a long-held and important social right that allows people like me and others to make fun of people in power. They are bastardizing jester's privilege. They are applying it to people who it shouldn't be applied to. A good example of this is what happened with the Kevin Hart roast and some of the racism that occurred, and how a lot of people's knee-jerk reaction was to say, well, it's a joke. It's supposed to be offensive, or you're not supposed to take it seriously. But maybe I'm not the messenger for this. So I've taken the liberty of borrowing a clip from a comedian and comedy coach, Londale Jr., who speaks on the subject in a couple of ways that I think are very poignant to the subject matter at hand. Here's his thoughts.
5 reasons why most people enjoyed the Tom Brady roast, but they wasn't really messing with the Kevin Hart roast. For a roast, no topic is off limits, cruelty is on the table, but if you want people to actually laugh and enjoy it, the creativity of the joke has to surpass the cruelty of the joke. In the Tom Brady roast, Nikki Glaser had such an iconic moment because the creativity of her jokes were at 100%, the cruelty of the jokes were below that. For the Kevin Hart roast, some of these jokes were the opposite. The cruelty was at 100% and the creativity was at a 20%, and that's being generous. 2, notice how in the Tom Brady roast, when a white guy is getting roasted, he's roasted about his choices on the football field, his choices in business, his choices in marriage. But when a black person gets roasted, it always focuses on dehumanizing their blackness. Let's not focus too much on the choices, let's dehumanize an entire race. You see how roasting someone's life choices versus dehumanizing an entire race are not equal? Number 3, who's telling the joke matters. This is a psychological reality. If a punchline is going to make someone genuinely laugh, it needs to surprise them and release tension. In roasts, punchlines are cruel and cruelty tends to add tension. How can cruelty release tension? There needs to be a separation between who is telling the joke and the cruelty of the joke. So if you're going to tell a joke that is racist, it needs to be obvious that the person telling the joke is far from racist. That separation creates surprise, absurdity, satire, irony, and we can be in on the joke. But if these are the people telling the jokes and these are the people writing the jokes, all we see is white supremacist joke being told by white supremacists and written by white supremacists. And if you want to argue those are just jokes, they're not racist, they're not white supremacists. If you're going to tell a racist joke, your job is to make it obvious you are not racist in real life. And if we confuse the two because of how you live your life, and if a white supremacist and a comedian looks like the Spider-Man meme and we can't tell the difference, that's your fault, not ours. 4, comedy always exists in relation to the current state of society. So when we praise Richard Pryor and Carlin for the words they used and the topics they did and the shock they did, that was subverting the dominant culture of the time. So what is the dominant dominant culture today. Our country's run by white supremacists. There are still active lynchings happening without proper investigation. So when the government is being run by white supremacists and the comedians hang out and support white supremacists and you're telling jokes that are white supremacists, there's nothing subversive about that. It's just supportive. So when your jokes are supporting the harm of the dominant culture instead of subverting it, you can't say Richard Pryor and Carlin are your favorite comedians because they would not respect you. And 5, a lot of people say, well, the comedians agreed on that, so we should be okay with it. This was distributed on the biggest streaming platform for a global audience. When it's for mass distribution, it affects all of us. And Cheryl Underwood killed it in her response, but as she said, she was fine with it, so we should be fine with it. Their jokes are not about Cheryl Underwood. The jokes are using her to joke about the entire race of black people. And when jokes are not about the choices a person made, but about the entire race, all dark-skinned black women have to endure those racist jokes. Let me know in the comments how you felt about it, and if there's an angle I'm missing.
The parts that I want to talk about in Londale's videos are 3, 4, and 5. That's who is telling the joke, supporting versus subverting, and public impact, because I think those things are the most relevant to this subject. In regards to who's telling the joke, like I mentioned earlier, Joe Rogan openly endorsed Donald Trump, as did Theo Von. So when Theo Von says something bigoted, holds a bigoted belief, or flat out says that he doesn't have white privilege and that white people wouldn't harm black people and then move right next door to them, despite everything that has happened in the 1950s, 60s, and even before, and everything that is happening now, and you all go, well, he's joking. I don't really take that as a joke. I take that as a racist white man who has publicly endorsed and supported other races, despite the fact that he's backing away from them now, openly denying the existence of said racism, which is something that racists do all the time. Somebody will call you the N-word, and then another person who saw it when you call that out will say, well, they didn't mean it like that. They run interference for each other. What Theo Von did was run interference for an otherwise interesting and honestly necessary conversation about how poor white people can still have privilege over other groups of people because of their whiteness, because their whiteness can afford them financial gain, but doesn't always. But there are other social privileges that are worth unpacking and noticing. We can't have that conversation if Theo Von is informing his fan base that he doesn't think that stuff is real and that history didn't happen the way it happened, while also literally being a racist. He's literally a white supremacist. There's no way to move away from that. When Joe Rogan talks out of the side of his neck about anything in regards to crime and the racialized stereotypes that come with that inherently because of who we deem to be inherently more criminal in this country, and when he speaks ill of Chicago, who has been stereotyped because of that crime and whose black people have to carry the brunt of those stereotypes, and he doesn't bother to look up what he's saying, and people go, oh, well, he's a podcaster. He doesn't need to know what he's doing. Or worse, when they pass off what he's saying as just a joke or a bit or a sideways comment, they're completely ignoring the fact that, again, this is a man who has openly supported white supremacy. And despite the fact that he's critical of it now, he's only critical because of the fact that it's impacting him negatively. And in regards to subverting anything, nothing that they say is subversive. In regards to Joe Rogan's stand-up, it's not good at all, but it's not like he's had an original idea. And in regards to Theo Von, the denial of racism by a racist is something that racists have done all the time. They're not subverting anything. And when you spend a chunk of your career picking at other people, specifically people who have already been downtrodden, you're not really subverting expectations. You are supporting the grander culture. Again, a point that Londale has made. But I want to extend that further by showing you exactly how George Carlin feels about stuff like that.
His right to do everything he does. The thing that I find unusual, and it's not a criticism so much, but his targets are underdogs. And comedy traditionally has picked on people in power, people who abuse their power. Women and gays and immigrants are kind of, to my way of thinking, underdogs. And, he ought to be careful because he's Jewish. And a lot of the people who want to pick on these kind of groups, the Jews are on that list a little further. You got women, gays, gypsies, blah, 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 and then suddenly you find Jews. And
suddenly Andrew's arrested.
Yeah, so, obviously he should do what he wants. And
why does he get away with it, do you think, then? Well, we have never laughed at jokes about the poor.
He's appealing. I think he's appealing largely. I think his core audience are young white males who are threatened by these groups. I think a lot of these guys aren't sure their manhood because that's a problem when you're going through adolescence. Could I be? I hope I'm not one of them. And the women who assert themselves and are competent are a threat to these men, and so are immigrants in terms of jobs. And and the
So that's why we as an audience then will laugh.
You say we. I don't think you're.
I mean,
in
no,
but I
mean
think you're
collective we.
I think that's what is at the core of that experience that takes place in these arenas. Is a certain, a sharing of anger and rage at these targets. And I'm sure Andrew isn't that angry at them. I'm sure he's playing it as a comic.
Now, the reason Carlin is so important to this conversation is because a lot of edgy comedians like to quote Carlin and say that he's one of their favorite comedians, even though ideologically and in artistic practice, they couldn't be more further away. A lot of people like to invoke Carlin in the same way that white supremacists invoke Dr. King. Judge me not by the color of my skin, but by the content of my character, is something that they often tout because you're calling them out on their access to privilege or the ways in which they engage in social violences. When you call people out on their bad comedy, they will invoke Carlin and go, well, he's edgy, he would have liked this. And Carlin simply wouldn't have. So by many contemporary definitions, and classical definitions, what's happening isn't really comedy. These guys aren't joking, and if they were trying to, what they're doing shouldn't count as jokes. Jester's privilege simply doesn't apply to people who aren't being jesters. Being a bigot is not being a jester. The fifth and final point that Londale brought up was the social impact and the reach. These people are not having private conversations. These are people who have hundreds of millions of followers. And their reach being that expansive means their jokes are really dangerous when not done properly or when not properly researched. When Joe Rogan misinforms people on policy that directly impacts people based off of race and class, he perpetuates white supremacy. When Theo Von says the stuff he says about white privilege or endorses the presidential candidates that he endorses, he supports white supremacy. When Joey breathes, he makes me upset. But on a more serious note, saying that One Piece isn't political, making videos that say that anime isn't that deep, being taken to task about some of the things that come out of his mouth when he talks about women, and then crashing out on his fan base and on commenters by saying that they misconstrue what he said while making long dramatic videos about how he's going to quit and how done he is. All of that perpetuates the misogyny that he engaged in that original video where he flipped out on a woman for simply wanting to see more women in anime. All of that is socially violent, and all of that should be taken seriously because these are not closed incidents and they're not private incidents. These are incidents that have long reach and long impacts. And make no mistake, people shouldn't be behaving this way in private either, and their friends and family should be calling them out and supporting the people who they've harmed. But having a reach this large does make the impact really dangerous. You can't give jester's privilege to everybody. It's dangerous, and people with platforms this large who aren't using those platforms to actually attack people in power, well, that's just not jester's privilege. What Drewski is doing, that qualifies. That is directly applicable to the definition of jester's privilege. But being racist for the fuck of it, nah, not really. Now, a few of you are probably thinking, okay, well, now what do we do? And to be frank, dude, I don't know. I can't make y'all read. I wish I could make y'all read, but I can't. I can't make you look stuff up. I can't make you check out proper information. The type of people who listen to guys like this are the type of people who go, oh, a new law came out. I should listen to a podcaster about it instead of like a lawyer or a judge or anybody who works in the judicial branch or legislative branch of our government. That way I can understand what's going on. I love living near an airport and having a job where I have to record. It's great. Nah, but really, I just found a lawyer that was talking about the Pretrial Fairness Act and the effects that it had after a prolonged time of it being in the situation, on top of what other lawyers had to say about it before it got passed. I'll share one of those videos with you now. But that's how I form my opinions. I actually listen to real experts instead of just a guy who used to kickbox who wasn't even that good at it.
What's called the Bail Reform Act. It's also known as the Pretrial Fairness Act. The Pretrial Fairness Act outlines a number of offenses that are detainable offenses, such as murder, domestic violence, etc. Then the judge has to decide, if the person is not detainable, what are the least restrictive conditions that the judge could release the person on. The original perception on the Pretrial Fairness Act is it's going to let out a lot of people who shouldn't be let out. Where the Pretrial Fairness Act has changed things demonstrably is previously, if you were charged with a major offense, and let's say the judge set bail at $250,000, a number of people could raise that $250,000. Now bail is no longer a possibility. In terms of bail reform and how it's worked, I think it's worked phenomenally well. Realistically, again, the fears were it's going to let all sorts of people out who shouldn't be out, and it's going to keep people in who shouldn't be in. It's been exactly the reverse. Bottom line is that more people who were previously being let out on serious crimes are kept in.
I've never woken up in the morning and thought, I need an alcoholic to inform me about what my government is doing. So I don't know what to do, because I wouldn't do this. You couldn't pay me to do this. This is silly. Same with anime stuff. I don't listen to other people talk about anime so that I can learn about my opinions on the anime. I listen to people talk about anime to see if they have the same interpretation that I had, and then I weigh it based off of my experiences, my understanding of the history, and then I also go, read about or listen to what the mangaka / the show directors did. If we're talking about a manga that got adapted into an anime, and then I look to see if there's differences and stuff. I really consume the media for myself, so I don't listen to content creators or podcasters in order to glean meaning from media. I just listen to them to kind of get their take because I'm curious about what they have to say. But my opinion is usually mine, and it's informed by genuine information and context. Other people can provide a degree of context, but I'm still going to provide that information for myself, or rather go get it for myself by listening to people who are actually in the field. I don't care how many times Atomic Purple Mods threatens to pew me and then turns around and talks to me in my comments about Jesus. He can't convince me that One Piece isn't political because I listened to Oda talk about it, and I read interviews, and I've also read a history book. I'm not going to let some dude with a front-facing camera influence my opinions. I have a library card. I'm not going to listen to bro. I'm going to fuck around and let some dude who ain't been working class in decades since he got on MTV when he's 19 years old, now he in his 40s, convince you all to vote against your own interests by supporting a billionaire who paradoxically also don't care about the working class, even though the working class is the reason he has all his money. Just for that dude who told you to vote for that billionaire to pull back the endorsement after he's done a bunch of goofy shit that he said he was going to do to begin with, because the dude who told you to endorse that billionaire didn't fucking read about him and doesn't care because he's not actually poor. He just pretends to be poor and plays up the poverty he might have used to live in order to look relatable to you when he ain't been working class and ain't had a regular job in more than 20 fucking years. That's what y'all gonna fuck around and do. Y'all gonna let a bunch of rich people trick you into voting for a billionaire, and then that billionaire is gonna turn off all the cancer research, and now your Mima finna lose her left eye. Cause some rich dude told you to vote for another rich dude. That's what's gonna end up happening, but there's enough time to stop that from happening. We haven't gone too far yet. At some point, the buzzword woke or DEI needs to have an actual meaning to some of you. And you need to learn what that meaning is. And that doesn't mean personal interpretation. You don't get to reinterpret the meaning. You have to look up what those words actually mean. And you have to stop getting so mad at them that you fuck over yourselves because you won't look at stuff or because the guy who told you about it said something about it. You have to become uninfluenceable in that regard. You need to be influenceable by data and by real understandings of history, instead of whatever the fuck you're willing to be influenced by now. You have to actually take long, hard looks at your biases. Because men like the men I'm talking about are everywhere, and they're gonna keep getting away with it. And the reason they're gonna keep getting away with it is because nobody takes them seriously. Everything is a joke to them, like that jester's privilege that I was talking about earlier. And because y'all see them as not harmful or too buffoonish to actually be harmful, you end up getting tricked into a lot of bullshit. And you should be mad. You should be mad that people who look like you are tricking you because they play dumb while they rack up millions of dollars while cutting all the education and screwing over all the farm workers because the farm workers done voted against their own interests because the millionaire told them to, because the millionaire pretended to be one of them by playing dumb. Also, consider the fact that they think they're more like you because they play stupid. What does that say about what they think about you?
We won with Young. We won with old. We won with highly educated. We won with poorly educated. I love the poorly educated.
When people have a particular worldview and a certain amount of followers, it's okay to take the shit that comes out of their mouths seriously. There's money behind it. There's resources behind it. There's need behind it. You know what I'm saying? There's a lot of stuff behind that, and you don't want to take that lightly. There's a lot of stuff that come out of my mouth, and you should take that very seriously, right? Take me seriously too. I have an ideology to push. I have an agenda of my own. Fuck, I look like lying about that. I'm just willing to tell the truth. They are doing this shit on purpose, and they know exactly what the fuck they're doing. Even in their grand stupidity, they're still smart enough to know that they're doing it on purpose. They know they don't know what the fuck they're talking about, and they know that you aren't going to check them, and they're using that against you. You have to start giving a shit about what the people you allow to influence you say. You have to start taking them to task. You have to start turning off that goddamn TV or that goddamn phone when they play with you. There ain't no way in hell Joe Rogan told all of y'all to vote for that man, and then y'all started losing money, losing rights, and his podcast is still popular, especially after he rolled back that endorsement, especially after Theo Von and them rolled back their endorsements. The second they rolled back those endorsements because they couldn't support the thing they told you all to support, you should have pulled that shit all the way back. They should be broke right now, but y'all have to have the backbone to go, you know what? You sent me the fuck off, and I'm not going to listen to you anymore. Also, you did that shit on purpose because you in the same tax bracket as the dude you told me to support. You should have checked that shit immediately. Like, they're playing dumb. You might be a little bit. You should work on that. But yeah, they doing that to you on purpose. They're tricking you on purpose, and when you go, it's just a joke, or it's not that serious, or they're too silly to be harmful, or they don't mean it, or they get away with it more, and then the platform grows, and then you get fucked over, and it's just, your rights get funky. You end up deporting your own wife because a lot of y'all like interracial dating, but don't understand that if the person's a different color than you, they're going to get treated different. Or maybe you did realize that and you just didn't care because you thought, well, my wife is special. Nah, that's not happening. You know, just a bunch of shit goes wrong when you don't take shit seriously and when you think everybody's fucking playing with you. Relatability is a fucking trap. I remember somebody was in my comments talking about some used to be funny and relatable, and now I don't find you relatable anymore. I can't be relatable. I can only be myself. And if you relate to me, then that means you have a shared experience. Anybody who's relatable to everybody all the fucking time is a fucking liar. I would rather be disliked by everybody than loved by everyone, because that means I was never my fucking self. Oh, well, you know, the content, the podcast, it just feels like I'm hanging out with my friend. Go make a real friend. That millionaire's not your friend, dude. The fucking millionaire is not your friend. Go outside. Always falling for some shit. God damn. You're a dumbass. Stop. Learn to fucking read. Learn how to fucking read, bro. Shit, I want you to be better.